Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on Spite Reach playing as the Empire against the forces of the Dark Elves. And this is one of those kind of interesting matchups just because both factions are so very flexible. It's probably the main reason why right now, if anything, Dark Elves are probably the only slightly overpowered faction in the game. It really doesn't come down too much to their units. It's mostly just the fact that they've got so many viable compositions that you can never really prepare for all of them. But I figured, try to build something because, of course, you've got cavalry builds, you've got Sisters of Slaughter builds, you've got your opponent can go with builds centered around dragons and just trying. It's more rare against Empire, which is pretty heavy duty shooting, but still, you might see a lot of dragon play. You might see there's a variety of infantry, of course. There's Hogneth Executioners. There's a very wide or more wide sort of build like this with Dread Spears and Blackheart Corsairs. Of course, Witch Elves is something you have to be very wary of. Your opponent can go shooting heavy. They can even bring bolt throwers. There's a lot of ways they can take it. So what I decided to do here is I did bring Barfazar Gelt. So I wanted to essentially ensure I could win the cavalry engagement, even against Cold One Knights, who honestly are they're one of the better cavalry units in the game, just because of how cheap they are relative to how well they can do against enemy cavalry. So if they go in against Knights of the Blazing Sun normally, or even Reiksguard, maybe not Zintler's Reiksguard, but normal Reiksguard, they'll win fairly decisively. And it was a cheaper investment for your opponent, so it's a pretty important thing to keep in mind. So what I decided to do here is I did bring. So I did decide to bring Balthazar, and the main reason for that, well, a few reasons for that. He does, of course, have Metal Shifting, which is nice. Searing Doom to bust up blobs, which is always good. Plague of Rust, minus 60 armor when overcast, means that your cavalry will trade really, really effectively with enemy cav, and it's a fairly long duration. Generally, it will last for a whole duel or a whole fight. And of course, oftentimes you'll have cavalry engagements going on multiple flanks, or you'll have big blob fights. So for that, I brought Final Transmutation. My opponent had decided to bring a Lord, throw him into the fray against, say, my clump of cavalry, and it just had a huge blob fight with, say, Slenish's Harvesters and 2 Cold One Knights and all that sort of stuff. I'd have a Final Transmutation ready to nuke them into the ground and teach them a lesson. Of course, we then also do have Arcane Conduit as well as Staff of Valance. For a front line, dirt cheap. Nothing much to say there. A few spearmen. One of them is shielded because I wasn't sure if my opponent had shooting. I wanted some shields on this at least one flank. Try to screen him out. Sigmar's Sons, Flagellants, and then an Empire Captain to try to anchor things. Empire Captain is a fairly cheap investment. He does provide that AoE melee defense aura. He's under 600 gold like this, and you can actually get him for, I think, less than 500 if you just bring completely stripped down Empire Captain. But I didn't want to get that slight boost to melee defense. In the front, we do have 2 Pistoliers, who I brought largely to zone out enemy Dark Riders with crossbows. Obviously, you're not going to be zoning out normal Dark Riders with Pistoliers, but against Dark Riders with crossbows, these guys will do rather well. They can chip away at things like a Supreme Sorceress. Honestly, even if you hit something with Balthazar Gelt, I'm not a big fan of Pistoliers, but even if you do hit something with Balthazar Gelt's Plague of Rust, these guys will do quite a bit of damage to it, even if it's like Blackguard or Cold One Knights or whatever. Of course, the main killing power here is the heavy cav, but we do have 2 Outriders with grenade launchers to bust up those blobs. I did do a video recently where I discussed how I think these guys are really strong in Empire matchups and how they can carry entire games by crushing enemy infantry. And this is definitely one of the games where I think they're really solid because Dark Elves don't have too many tools to counter them. You can generally force their light cav off with your own cavalry, so I think they can do rather well. One flank we have Knights of the Blazing Sun, other flank we have Knights of the Blazing Sun and Reiksguard, Zintler's Reiksguard of course, and then in the center we do have the Royal of Grivites. So we only have 1 AP cav, so we're definitely relying on Barfazar to win us those cav fights, because while the Royal of Grivites can swing a battle here or there, they're not going to be able to win the whole thing. They're not going to be able to win every flank. And that's the goal, to win all the flanks. Now for my opponent, he did decide to go, once again, with a fairly cheap Caster Lord. He went with a Sorceress of Death. She's got Spirit Leech, Fate of Buna, Soul Blight, so a decent selection of spells. Personally, I don't really think Fate of Buna is that good anymore, especially not against Empire. I can still do well against heavy cav like Zintler's Reiksguard or whatever, but see, if you're trying to get rid of Demigryph Knights, you're better off just using Spirit Leech, in my opinion. It's cheaper, and you can chip them down still relatively effectively. And you'll be taking whole models, which is really nice. The front line, some Dread Spears to zone off, of course, my cavalry, as well as they will trade okay with state troops. 2 Blackheart Corsairs to win out against most state troops. I don't know if they'll win against, say, Sigmar's Sons. Sigmar's Sons have really solid melee stats. They don't have great armor, but they definitely have a lot more HP, and they definitely have pretty respectable melee stats. One of the things people don't realize, I think, is that a lot of state troops actually have decent melee stats compared to other cheap chaff infantry. Their disadvantages come elsewhere, not having silver shields, not having any special abilities or any of that sort of stuff, but on baseline stats are pretty solid. Dark Shards with shields are making up the core of the center of the force here. Probably has a zoning tool against my skirmish cav, as well as to provide some fire support if I had, say, great swords. 2 Black Guard of Nagarond on either end. These guys, of course, are a great tool against cavalry, backed by the Sisters of the Singing Doom, who are, of course, the terror-causing witch elves. Pretty nasty piece of work. These guys are really, really solid, but fortunately they are pretty squishy, and against anything from, if we can get anything from Pistoliers to Grenadiers to our cavalry charging into them, they will not last long. Finally, in the very back, 2 units of Cold One Knights. Of course, great. Once again, another great cavalry counter. My opponent here looking to essentially win the front line, probably with a cheaper infantry component, and then probably hoping to sort of zone off my cavalry with his very heavy anti-cavalry presence. Over here in the woods, he does have 2 Dark Riders shields also hidden out there, who I did forget to mention. But regardless, he is going to do a flyover here. I'm not even entirely sure what's hitting him there. I'm not sure what did a little bit. Maybe my Pistoliers there clipped him a little bit. I don't know. He's taking a little bit of hurt. But he is going to cast a Fate of Buna on my roll of Griffites, and we can watch how much damage that does. The thing is, Fate of Buna is not really meant for unit sizes that are this small. It's a spell that's meant more against like the 45-ish range of models, like Knights of the Blazing Sun, though they have magic resistance, but them, or Reichsguard, or those sorts of units. If my opponent wanted to use Fate of Buna anywhere, I would have actually dropped it on the Zindler's Reichsguard. I think that would have been a better investment. But regardless, I do decide to charge in with the Outriders, and you can see here, my opponent immediately fires back, and that's of course great. He's going to do a lot of damage on that opening volley, but we don't lose too many models, so it doesn't really matter too much. And then in come the grenades. They're going to be disrupting the Dark Shards, sending them flying, and of course when they're sprawling, they're not able to shoot. And I actually barrage them down with Balthazar Gelt's ability as well, the Searing Doom, overcasted. So suddenly these guys are having a very horrible time. Of course, with their very low armor, they're not holding up well at all to those grenades. And of course, they're not really able to shoot back because we've disrupted them so badly. And I saw my opponent only had 1 unit of Dark Shards, which is why I risked that maneuver there. And already we've managed to force those Dark Shards off the field. So great little win for us right off the bat, getting that shooting off the field, and that's going to make life much more miserable for my opponent. In the meantime, the front line is clashing. The Empire Captain, the Sigmar Sons, all of those troops diving right in. You can see the Royal Elf Griffites lost about 1,200, 1,400 HP. You know, it has lost HP. I don't have healing, but honestly, not the greatest gain. If I had Lore of Life, I could undo this with like a single Earth Blood, probably, maybe like an Overcast Earth Blood. It's not really that great. You can see on the flanks, though, these spearmen kind of bogging things down. My opponent pushing out with the Cold One Knights, probably looking to get some good engagements, but instead he gets snared here. A little bit of miss micro, and his Cold One Knights are going to get bogged down against my spears. Over here on the flank, he is able to just kind of sweep around, hitting poor Barfazar here with an Overcast Spirit Leech. As I'm so fond of saying, always check what Overcasts do. My opponent here might be a little new. Maybe he doesn't entirely know how spells work, but always check what your Overcasts do before using a spell that auto overcast, or check your lore. If you're not sure, when you're in the loading screen or when you're in the preparation screen, check what it does. Know what it does. Don't just assume it does more damage or that it's going to be better in a certain way. Well, you can see here, my Pistoliers fighting off these Dark Riders. They're not going to be able to run forever. I've actually just lazily set them in skirmish mode and had them run for dear life. They're going to get run down. But here we are going to hit these Cold One Knights with the Plague of Rust, and you can see just how much damage these Knights of the Blazing Sun do. These guys didn't get a charge off because they're bogged down against the Spearmen. In come the Royal Griffites, in come the Knights of the Blazing Sun, and these Cold One Knights are having a horrible time. They're going to completely rout here, completely fall apart. Down to 20 models. We actually have our grenades flying in from the flank, so that's applying that missile pressure as well. And with the tear out and the complete break here, we've managed to eliminate a very, very heavy chunk of my opponent's army, and possibly one of the most important chunks because he needs this mass to stop my cavalry from running amok. Elsewhere, he's doing much better. Over here, he hits me with the Soul Blight, as well as the, which of course deals my armor, as well as my weapon damage. It's going to make his Cold One Knights much more effective, but we are going to counteract him with Balthazar Gelt here, who is going to drop a lovely, lovely final transmutation, which is just going to annihilate these troops. The Cold One Knights, you can see, having a horrible time of it. Honestly, big mistake on my part here. Was not waiting for the black card to get into range. If I had done that, I would have gotten even more value out of it. Now, you might say Final Transmutation here is a bit of a waste. Maybe, but I don't have Plague of Rust off cooldown. I really don't want to be losing too much of my cavalry here. It's already taken quite a bit of a beating. And while the Sentinel's Reichsguard will definitely hold for a while, I just need to get these guys off the field. I need to be clearing out this infantry so that I can then collapse back over here and start wiping out these infantry pockets. So we're going to countercharge here with the Royal Elf Griffites. You can see they're just buckling these Cold One Knights. They're not going to last very long. Unfortunately, like I said, we didn't wait. But you can see the grenades doing so much damage to the Blackguard and Nagaron. They're already wiping them out by about, I don't know, 2,000 HP. So a very hefty amount of damage being done. Certainly we're going to lose some Royal Elf Griffites here. We're going to take a bit of a beating, but we are able to once again force these Cold One Knights off, get them off the field. They're down to less than 600 HP. And then, rather than letting the Blackguard just pound us into oblivion, we're going to pull back, get out of dodge, and let the Outriders continue barraging them. And you can see just how much damage. Those grenades are really no pushovers. It's one of those things that a lot of people underestimate. They look at it and it's like, oh, it's not AP, so meh, whatever, don't bother. But just look at how much damage these grenades are doing. And these guys are a huge threat to me. These guys are one of the few units, once the Cold One Knights are off the field, that are a real threat. Elsewhere, we are able to sweep around. And you can see there's a lot of stuff going on, so I'm definitely not keeping the best track. You can see the Pistoliers running amok, trying to just poke away at the Supreme Sorceress. She does surprisingly have 80 armor on the Manticore. Not entirely sure why, given that even if she's on a Manticore, she's like naked, and I guess the Manticore does have armor on it, but I can't think. Most other lords, even if they do get an armor buff, they usually don't get that much of an armor buff. But because I think her baseline armor is really, really bad. But regardless, so we are chipping away with the Pistoliers there. Our Outriders with grenade launchers getting clear. Here in the back line, my opponent actually forgets his Dark Riders. You can see, had we had a little more room to kite, we would have probably been able to do leave a bit more of a dent in them, but unfortunately we just didn't. Elsewhere, though, you can see the Knights of the Blazing Sun are going to do mop-up. They're finally going to catch these Dark Shards that escaped earlier. We're going to pile into the back of them and just destroy them. And at this point, it's really important to start picking off troops that are a threat, or that could be a threat. So over here, our Spearmen are going to catch and push off the Dread Spears. My opponent's troops are getting a little distracted. You can see one of them chasing the Empire Captain, who finally did break. 27 kills against probably Blackheart Corsairs. Not terrible, given that he was a cheap investment, and he really helped that front line hold. I think this is one of those niches where the Empire Captain can serve a purpose. Normally, I wouldn't really recommend him, but he's a lot cheaper than the Priest if you're looking to use the Priest, and he can help that line hold. But the Knights of the Blazing Sun here are going to just buckle these Dark Shards, completely wipe them off the field. Elsewhere, the Outriders with grenade launchers definitely a little isolated. This is not where you want your Outriders to be in life. Even though they are doing great work here against the Blackguard, really teaching them a lesson, they're just so very out of position. But if you look, well, they still have a lot of ammo, 12 and 12. They're up to 37 kills, 43. Most of those against high-value targets, some against Dread Spears. Dark Shards, though, they're fairly valuable in a sense. And here what we're going to be able to pull off is a bit of a snowball. My opponent definitely a bit of a misplay, perhaps not used. I think my opponent was a little bit new here, because he does push in with Blackheart Corsairs. Instead of rallying his infantry, he really probably should have tried to regroup up here on the hill, and then pushed out together. But what we are going to be able to do is snowball this advantage. The Blackheart Corsairs are going to buckle, of course, with the tear from the Royal fights. They can't really hold up, and it's just a complete slaughterhouse here in the pits. In the meantime, the Outriders with grenade launchers, they're going to take a little bit of damage from the Sorceress of Death, but they're going to be able to skirt back, kite around, and evade her for quite a bit. Over here, the Empire Captain actually does get caught and murdered by the Blackguard, so that's a little unfortunate, but it happens. It happens to the best of us. And here we're going to do something a little bit risky. You can see the Blackguard here on 1800 HP, definitely, and of course they have very good leadership. With 51 leadership, they've got decent melee defense, all that sort of stuff, but we are going to hit them with Plague of Rust, and we are just going to collapse on them from all sides with our cavalry, taking advantage before this main unit of Blackguard can get into position. And with that flank charge coming in, with only 40 armor on them, these guys are just going to buckle, and you can see they're getting surrounded and just torn to shreds. Elsewhere, there's so much happening. You can see the grenades tearing through the Sisters of Singing Doom, and they completely fall apart. In the space of just a few seconds, thousands of damage being done. This is an over 1,000 gold unit, and they are off the field. They've just been routed completely by our lovely, lovely bombardiers there, and they're just completely scared off. Here in the pits, the Blackguard is going to rout, which is what we wanted to do. We just wanted to rout them off and sort of do as much damage as we could. We did about 1,200 damage, perhaps a bit of an overcommitment. We didn't really need to push all our cavalry in. We could have probably just gone in with the 2 Knights of the Blazing Sun for the same effect, but it is what it is. We're going to pull around. We're going to plow into these spears. You can see the Outriders there are going to force the Sisters off and basically annihilate them. We've got these spears pulling back into the fray. Over here, these spears are going to get thrown into the fight. They're not going to do great, but they're just going to bog these guys down for a tiny bit before they completely buckle. So state troops taking one for the team. The Pistoliers here still being a distraction, still distracting the Sorceress. And unfortunately, I let these Blackguard get away, so that definitely kind of sucks. But you can see now the Outriders with grenade launchers are once again on point and just barraging the Blackguard. If we look, we can see just how much damage is being done. Clumped up like this, they really are not enjoying this treatment. You can see the Blackguard losing thousands of HP in that barrage. They'll probably lost about 1,000 HP in a single barrage. So Sorceress comes down. We're going to pull away. Of course, we don't want to be taking this engagement. Barfazar and company just pushing into her, trying to get her off the field. Definitely a little risky here. Over here, though, the Cold One and Dread Knights are actually going to tear at her before they make contact. The beauty of the Zittler's Reichsguard, of course. The Outriders will barely try to sort of extricate themselves here. Unfortunately, a bit of a misplay here. I didn't actually pull them out. But the Sorceress here definitely making a mistake, getting caught out on the ground. She doesn't have the best melee stats. She does have decent armor, like I said, surprisingly. But not great on the melee defense. And with only 34 melee defense, we are going to ride her down here. She's having a horrible time of it. Royal Fights, of course, are going to be taking meaty chunks out of her HP pool. And before she can escape, she does stagger a few of the knights there. But she's going to get swiped with a halberd there, and down she goes. Look at that majestic beast lying in the pits. In the meantime, our Pistoliers doing valuable work running down these Blackheart Corsairs, one of those very nifty things. Much like you got leftover Skaven slaves or units like that, you can often chase troops out the field. You can do the same thing sort of with Pistoliers. And now my opponent still have a unit of Blackguard, who we are consistently pounding with grenade launchers. You can see whittling them down pretty decisively. And as we pile into the spears, my opponent's army is finally simply going to just shatter. The Dark Riders never quite making it back into contact. So good game, and a victory for the Empire. I don't actually think. I think this is one of the worst matchups for Empire. Not necessarily the worst. I definitely think there's some weaker matchups, but I definitely think this is one of the weaker matchups for Empire. Definitely one of the tougher ones. But you can get a lot of damage done with certain builds, and I think in this situation definitely showed the power of Plague of Rust. The Plague of Rust managed to completely allow one of those Cold War Knights units to basically get annihilated. I don't even think they took a model off my Knights of the Blazing Sun, because they got no charge, and that was followed up by just being hammered in by cavalry by the Demigryph Knights, by the Knights of the Blazing Sun. They just really got wrecked there. State troops, they can hold. That's really their main purpose. They're there to buy you time, and they definitely did that well. This is one of those niches, like I said earlier, where I think the Empire Captain can serve rather well, because he does provide those AoE melee defense buff. +5 melee defense, it might not seem like much, but honestly, if you're fighting against, say, Bleak Swords with your Empire State troops, that can make the difference between a win and a loss. It is a minor difference, but it can definitely make the difference for some of your state troops in those small grind fests against some of those cheaper Dark Elf infantry, and otherwise it just buys you more time. Empire state troops generally have decent enough baseline stats that you can then buff further, and it's just solid. I'm trying to think of like what a comparison here would be, but like yeah, you can get a decent advantage there. Like Dread Spears have, I think, 25 melee attack. That means they're, for example, even against Flagellants, who have really bad, I think, 10 melee defense, they're hitting 45% of the time. You give the Flagellants +5 melee defense, suddenly they're only hitting 40% of the time. It's a difference. It adds up. The Cavalry, of course, the king here, and I did want to demonstrate those Outriders with grenade launchers. The damage they can do to any target, they will actually even... Outriders with grenade launchers will even tear through Phoenix Guard if they are given the opportunity to do their work. I don't know how well they'll do against, say, Black Orcs or Chosen, because those tend to have very high HP pool per model, which makes them less susceptible to splash. They also have slightly higher armor, but mainly the low model count and generally low density of those units makes them a little tougher for the target. But against basically any other heavy infantry, Outriders with grenade launchers are absolute king, and you can see how badly they mauled those Sisters of the Singing Doom, who have no armor to boot, so they just got destroyed. The Blackguard of Nagron, though, couldn't really hold up to that constant barrage. We still had a lot of ammo going, so had the game dragged out, and my opponent been able to avoid death with Supreme Sorcerers, we could have definitely taken down those Blackguard with just steady bombardment. So definitely some potent stuff. Definitely look out for these guys, and I'd recommend them. Give them a shot. They're definitely a fun unit worth experimenting with. Pistoliers, not great, but they did their job of distracting my opponent. There's not much else to say. They don't serve much else of a purpose. Regardless, good game to my opponent here, Califesto. Like I said, I don't actually think this is a bad composition. All things considered, I think this is a decent approach to taking on Empire. I personally prefer heavy cav built with Malekith, but whatever floats your goat. I don't think this is a bad composition, but just be wary of how you use your magic. Understand what Overcasts do. Understand how well certain spells work in certain situations. Fate of Buna against Demigryphs is a waste, in my opinion. Spirit Leech, overcasted at point-blank range, is a complete waste. So just do keep that in mind. But regardless, good game. I do hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys had fun watching some exploding Dark Elves. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe below to keep up with additional content. I do try to post daily, and so yeah. If you have any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to say, yeah, any requests, as usual, don't hesitate to post down below. I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. As usual, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.